Hey, what up, my beautiful people? How are you doing today? This is the Infinity Midwife coming to you once again. I'm coming to you with another message today because it is important that I put it out in the universe because that's the work that I do. And I feel like it's important that it gets heard, whether it's one person, two-person, doesn't really matter as long as it's being put out. So, as y'all know, we are talking about the collective shadow. In and of itself, we are bringing out of the darkness into the light what no longer serves us as a whole, as a collective, as humanity who is coming into this new era. This era of individual power, this era of individual authority, this era of empowerment. And so in order to be empowered, we need to know where have we been lacking, where have we been not attending to our own needs, what we've kept in the dark, what were our secrets, our family secrets, our intergenerational secrets or traumas or wounding that we need to attend in order to feel whole in our being. And then from that space, create a better place, create a better world, create a better reality for ourselves and for the rest of humanity. So this is the Infinity Midwife. We are talking about pleasure principle. The reason why I'm not getting away from that concept or that title, I feel like when we're talking about collective shadow, there is a lot that has been done to corrupt what pleasure is, to put it in a box, to stigmatize it, to make it exclusive to a certain group of people against another, to demonize it, to have it concealed or hidden. And I feel like as a collective or as humanity is growing and evolving, we need to dive deeper into the types of traditions, practices in our cultures. Especially, I'm specifically referring here to people from African descent, and also people, like if you do your reflection, you might find that in your traditions, whether you're from African descent or not, you can figure out what were the traditions that was hindering or that was harming or creating a lot of wounding throughout your generation, your generational line. So, but I will be focusing on my African people from African descent, whether you live across the ocean in the Caribbean or whether you are on the continent or whether you're a foreigner like me, it doesn't really matter. It's just speaking up about practices through religions, traditions, and cultures that we are still keeping alive, whether we don't talk about it or whether we do talk about it in a little bit. So it's time for us to come to this awareness that we can no longer keep things under the rug. It needs to come out, it needs to be talked about. And so the Infinity Midwife birth the greatest version of yourself, but also the greatest version of humanity as a whole. So we need to look at the deeper layers of ourselves because it starts with us, and then as well as the people around us and as a whole, that is humanity. So pleasure, the pleasure principle. This is another video. We're going to dive deep into some traditions that are still being kept alive, practices that are still being kept alive, whether it's through culture or traditions or religions. And so this is what I'm going to talk about today. Now, the importance of pleasure. The reason why I feel like if you've listened a little bit, part of the pleasure principle video I previously made, I did talk about this initial separation that happened between the feminine essence and the masculine essence. And so we're just gonna come back around this concept because I feel like it needs to be understood. Okay, it needs to be understood because if it's not, then like I'm speaking a very general view. Like there could be backstories to it. There could be some interpretation to it. I'm not here to do that. I'm here to clear the fog. Okay, I'm here to bring clarity. So if we go back to the original story that you can find in the Bible, there was this separation. There was this separation between the feminine essence and the masculine. Okay, and having that creation, or having that separation being done between the two essences, created a lot of illusions, created a lot of dogmas, created a lot of structures in order to reinforce that separation. And in order to reinforce that separation through that era of bondage that I'm calling it personally, I don't know if it really exists, but through that era of bondage, that illusion or that separation that was done needed to be reinforced through rules, through traditions, through religions, through cultures, through celebrations, through everyday celebrations. Like even when you look at the traditions today, you know, the traditions that we celebrate is actually reinforcing this separation right here between the masculine essence and the feminine essence. Okay, so when there was that initial separation, there needed to be things reinforced in order to keep those away. One of the things was to demonize the feminine essence, to put her in a box, to completely erase all sacredness from her essence. So you can see that throughout most of religion, especially the three monolithic religions, you can find that the feminine is demonized. The feminine is nowhere to be seen, or if she is somewhere to be seen, she is perceived in a certain way, or she is empowered, but not through her own narrative. It's usually a narrative from the external. It's usually an external force or an external narrative that is describing that feminine essence. And so through those separations between the two essences, there were traditions, there were cultures that reinforced that separation initially. In the previous video, I did talk about how it affected the masculine and how it expressed its pleasure, you know, because when you have this separation, one needs to be demonized and the other one needs to be idolized. So the masculine in essence was idolized, but it created a lot of shadow. It created a lot of things hidden, like pleasurable, like forbidden pleasures. And you know, like right now we are coming out of that era, and that's why we see a lot of stories about, you know, how homosexuality is rampant in some religions, how you have pedophilia running rampant in some religions, because there was this initial separation created in the beginning. So every time you see that there's some sort of reinforcement of rules of how to be conducted, or how to conduct yourself, or how a society or community needs to conduct themselves, usually what it is meant to do is to have some sort of power to uphold, to stay put on the community as a whole. But then what is also creating, it's also creating a lot of shadows, a lot of things lurking in the dark, a lot of things that are not being spoken about, because it is the human nature to explore all things. Okay, it is the human nature. This is why we have emotions. Emotions can be complex, can be diverse, like in all essences. Like we're here to experience. Okay, and so when we are put in a box of how we need to experience this life, or how we have this promise of, you know, getting into heaven if we do certain things or we live a certain way, that is not necessarily conducive, or that is not necessarily in alignment with our soul, our soul coding, then we get to create a lot of hidden things, a lot of hidden experience that we put, you know, in our shadow. And then that creates this bigger separations between the two essences. And then when it comes to the forefront, which is actually what's happening right now, people are shocked. People are shocked to discover that, in the Vatican, I'm not gonna talk too much about that, but there's a lot of stories coming up, like since the 80s of, priests abusing boys. There are stories about, where you can find some places in Afghanistan where imams and men are enjoying little boys dancing in front of them. All of this is the result of this initial separation. When you have men among men and women among women, I don't care how much you want to say is healthy, they are not interacting with one another. So therefore, whatever is going on with the man or whatever's going on with the woman, they are going to experience. They are going to experience whatever curiosity that they want to figure out or, find out. They're going to experience among themselves, and the women are going to experience among themselves. It's not going to be spoken about, but it is here. It is rampant. It is known. People won't really talk about, but I'm pretty sure that you can find out that there is an extensive amount of high, I'm not gonna say numbers, but I'm pretty sure if there was a study to come up with the statistics of the stats of the percentage of women who are low-key lesbian in the Islamic faith, we would find out, and we would see that there's a large number. Why? Because again, when you create that separation between this masculine essence and the feminine, there are things like, we're still human at the end of the day. So if you don't experience with one another while we're in union, we're going to experience amongst ourselves, however that translates. And so that's why we're seeing a lot of things coming out of the shadows, because again, the masculine living in this idealization or way of being, or, this excessive exploitation, we find that there's a lot of things that are coming out of the shadow about, financial corruption, exploiting of the land, exploiting of children, exploiting of women, exploiting of even men being abused, men being forced to do certain things. Because what we don't really talk about as well is even among men in these high level of hierarchies are still blackmailing one another in order to get to the top of the power, or to get more power, or to, they blackmail each other. They blackmail one another into doing things that are morally not accepted or whatever have you, just to get more power. So there are, again, with this initial separation, created separations within separations. This is what I talk about in my last video. And so when you want to keep that separation alive, you're going to have all types of rules. You're going to have ways of living, whether it's thought through religion, whether it's thought through education, whether it's thought through culture, some traditions, and that's just going to reinforce that separation. Okay? And so one of the things I want to talk about is how circumcision, female mutilation, are things that were passed down from generations to generations, and they are traumatic events that happen at a very early age in women and men. So I'm going to say children, so boys and girls who experience those type of traumas. And what we don't talk about is when you go through some type of heavy trauma, whether it's through mutilation, whether it's through cutting off a part of your body, whether it's through sexual trauma, somebody abused their power over you at a very young age, or physical trauma, you get that imprint. First of all, what happens to you is you completely cut yourself from that sense of pleasure, or that sense of worth, or that birthright that you are here to experience pleasure. Okay? You are imprinted in your DNA, in your gene, that you are here to experience only pain. Okay? That's one thing that's imprinted. Whether you're a little boy, a little girl, you've been circumcised, you've been mutilated, you've been sexually abused, you've been physically abused, you've been mentally abused, whether the age of 0 to 5, it's going to leave an imprint of unworthiness within your soul. It's going to get deeply embedded within your soul. And that's going to separate yourself. Here again, that separation that comes back, where you're going to separate yourself from that sense of worthiness. Because we come onto this earth within both the masculine and the feminine essence within ourselves. Okay? Every time we're born, we come with this union within ourselves. But if we carry into intergenerational trauma, or if we actually go through some sort of trauma within those early years of our life, we're going to separate. And usually what happens is we separate from our feminine. We separate from our femininity. We separate from our feminine essence because it's painful. Okay? It's just like, okay, no, I'm not gonna get, I'm not gonna give abstract examples here. So when you go through some heavy trauma at a very, very early age, like I have, you will separate yourself from your feminine. And the feminine is pleasure, is beauty, is art, it's the most expressive form of art and beauty, and we find that through pleasure. So when you are young and you experience some sort of heavy trauma, it's going to separate you from your feminine essence, and you're going to be anchored in your masculine essence forever, throughout your life. What does that mean? You're going to have this, first of all, you're going to have this heavy sense of unworthiness lying embedded, lying deep into your soul, your DNA. If you've been passed down with intergenerational trauma like I have, through female mutilation, you are going to carry some form of trauma within yourself that you're going to have to work on in order to break that curse, like I have. So again, when you've been through some heavy trauma, you will separate yourself from your feminine, because the feminine expresses through pleasure, through beauty, through art, and that's our birthright. But when we go through this heavy trauma, we separate from her. We leave her in the shadow. We leave her in the dark because it's painful. And so we anchor in this masculinity. We anchor onto this because we are reminded constantly that life is painful, that is betrayal, is heavy, is not worthy. So it's this unworthiness. Because we, again, are in separation, and we decided to separate because the pain was too heavy to bear, especially at a young age. Like, you just come into this world, and 7 days later, we cut your prepuce, or, like I don't want to bash no religions, but then when you get that concept of separation, you see how damageable it becomes for a little boy to grow up and to be in this toxic masculinity. It's easy, is what I'm saying. It's easy to become bendable. It's easy for you to become manipulated. It's easy for you to start not liking anyone around you, or treating children or women in a certain way, like they're objects. It's easy for you because even you yourself has gone through some heavy pain that you can't even describe, because it was so early on into you coming onto this earth. It was done like at a very, very, very early age. And then we normalize it, right? And then we do it to our children. We do it to our little boys, and we do it to our little girls because it has become normalized. So we are in this constant state of pain, okay? And we anchor in this masculine. So what does that say? It say that first, we no longer want to feel our emotions, because our emotions is gonna bring us back right to this shadow, to this initial or this original sin that was caused onto you. And you don't want to feel that. So obviously, you're probably going to become emotionally unavailable to yourself. You're not going to want to recognize your emotions. You're not going to want to recognize emotions in others. So you're probably going to become in denial or avoidant. And then you're going to grow up with this idea, just like you were taught maybe through your culture or your education, that in order to show love or to be loved, you need to go get some stuff. You need to go in this excessive mode of working, or this excessive mode of being, where you have to constantly work. You have to constantly bring things at home to be loved, or to show love. So you have to be constantly on this money mindset or materialistic mindset. So you're constantly doing for others. And then that's why we find a lot of men who are completely, at the age of 40, they go through this phase of, I don't know, whatever that's called, man crisis, right? We've normalized it, right? It's because men at a certain age, I don't want to talk about things that I don't know, but because this life is more complex than what it is, we've been dumbed down to this idea that we're just here to gain some sort of material stability or material gains, and then we have to live life a certain way, and then we go into this afterlife, and then we are fully enlightened. But that's not true. The enlightenment is here, is right now. Okay, so a lot of men are walking around with these heavy traumas, heavy loads of pains, and it keeps piling up. So whatever trauma or heavy traumas that's not part of this life process, that's not normal. So whatever type of trauma you're going to go through, there are some traumas that are healthy for your growth. But then there are some others that are here for programming, that are here for conditioning, that are here to keep you in a certain aspect of being. And for humanity as a whole, it has been for us to stay in that masculine essence, or that masculine excessive or toxicity. So even for little girls that have gone through heavy traumas between the age of 0 to 8 or 0 to 5, doesn't really matter, early on in their youth, whether it's sexual, psychological, mental, physical, mutilation, again, they separate from their feminine essence and they live solely in their masculine. And so what do? They do like men, but they're not men, they're women. So they get caught off from their emotions. They become emotionally unavailable. They are avoidant as well. And they have that belief, whether through education and culture, that they need to be bendable and manipulated, whether it's through a form of authority. So it could be parents, it could be the religious leader, it can be some form of authority that's going to tell her how she needs to conduct herself in order to gain material wealth for her and for her family. That's how she's going to feel recognized, loved, and appreciated. So all this is conditioning. It's conditioning for us to stay in that bondage, in that feeling of unworthiness. And the more I get manipulated, the more I listen to my parents, or I do what that leader told me to do, or the more that, I accept this marriage, even though I don't connect with that man, or, the more I get this material gain, I will be loved, I will be seen, I will be good, and then if I do how the books tells me to do, and if I live my life and I conduct my life in a certain way, then I'll get enlightened in this not in here, in the afterlife. So not even in this life, after I'm gone. And that's an illusion. That is a corruption of that's corruption of humanity. We've been corrupted for generations. And so I'm here to say, we all carry wounds, some heavy, some less heavy. And so they're all valid, but we need to start healing. Both men and women need to come and union with their feminine again. And how does that look like? It starts by going back to that original sin, that original wounding, that injustice, that thing that plagued you from your childhood, and that kept you stagnant, that kept you in this robotic or automatic or autopilot way of being, where you were completely cut from your emotions and you have no idea how to be in the world. So then you look elsewhere, you look outside of you. You no longer listen to your intuition because you've been separated from her, right? So when we start doing the work to heal, we need to go back to that original sin. That original sin is when you separated. Is the cause of that initial separation. That's the original sin. It's nothing else. When you initially separated is when that original sin, like the cause behind it, is the original sin. So we need to go back to that. How were you wounded? If you were wounded. Okay? And sometimes it can be little things. It can be, someone like your parents gaslighting you, or, talking to you a certain way, making you feel unworthiness. So let me just backtrack a little bit. The original sin is the original act or cause or event or circumstance or treatment that you received that made you feel so unworthy of yourself that you decided to just separate and to live only in your masculinity and to live only in your masculine essence. And that's what we've been doing through that era of bondage. Era of bondage because it kept us separated from the feminine essence. And through the programming of demonizing women, demonizing the feminine essence, demonizing nature. Oh yes, demonizing nature. Nature is the most beautiful natural form of godliness, but it has been demonized because when you look at nature, it goes back to the feminine essence, right? So we've been through different programming, education, culture, religion, what have you. It has been conceived to keep you in this separation. So the moment you choose through that original sin, the cause of that original sin, that you're no longer worthy of living in union within yourself, you separate and then you stay in this constant state of unworthiness. And when you are living in your masculine essence and you have that strong belief that you are unworthy, you're gonna live in excessiveness. You're gonna do things in exploitation. You're gonna do things toxic. You're gonna live in this masculine toxicity because you're carrying, again, every time you're gonna want to dig deeper into who you are, it's gonna bring you back to that original sin and you're gonna shut the door. You're not gonna wanna look at it. And then when you're gonna hit your 40s, when it's time for you to evolve into something else, you're gonna go through whatever men call it midlife crisis, where they start, going back into the youth again. And now, like, women are probably experiencing the same thing, but we don't talk about it. So it's us, like, it's a calling. When we hit the age around 40 years old, it's the calling for us to get back into our inner child, right? We want to feel that love again, that youth again, because we've been so much burdened with so much responsibilities, ways of thinking, attachments that are unhealthy, ways of doing that are not toxic. So what men do, they get into this midlife crisis phase, and we've normalized it. But if we go a little deeper, we will figure out that this midlife crisis is associated with this original sin, or the cause of the original sin that made them separate from their feminine essence at a very, very young age. And they're trying to go back to that, but they don't know how to, talk about it. They don't know how to describe it, so we just call it midlife crisis. But there are layers to this. And women too, we don't want to talk about it, but women at some point, if they've been living according to a certain way of doing and a very autopilot way of being, at some point down the line, like even in 20 years into a marriage or whatever have you, they separate, and we don't know what's the cause. It's because they've been carrying heavy burdens. They've been carrying ways of doing, attachments that are unhealthy, toxicity within themselves. And then around the age of 40, because the age of 40, I don't want to go too deep into the astrology behind it, but like life is a cycle, okay? At 7 years old, there's a cycle. At some time during, your human evolution, there are many cycles. And then the age of 40 is a very different cycle, because again, we get into this more evolved part of ourselves. But if we've been living on autopilot, or not wanting to see the things that, that are really, really wounding to us, or that are really like painful for us, at the age of 40, we're just gonna explode and want to do things different. But yeah, we need to go back to that original sin if we really want to get things healed, and then evolve in a better way, or evolved in a more wholesome way. Okay? So that was the video I wanted to share with you. Pleasure Principle part 5 or 6. I don't know where we're at. But I feel like it's really important that we get that message, because we are literally leaving that era of bondage, which means that we are going through a time, not only the pandemic, not only whatever is going on into the world, but we are living in a time where there is war outside, right? There are all sorts of not distractions. There are all sorts of things, crucial events, worldly events that are going on the external, that is going to trigger every individual, okay? Maybe not children, or maybe children too, but it's going to trigger us to look at the deeper layers of ourselves. And that's why we're going to see like our world falling apart. We're going to see separations within relationships. We're going to see things really falling apart. But that's a calling. It's a calling upon your life to say, listen, if you want to get out of that era of bondage, look at the deeper layers within yourself. Look at that original sin. Look at the cause of that original sin and heal it. Because it's going to take you someplace else. Because again, we're leaving that era where we're going to walk into union within ourselves and creating a better, harmonious environment on the external, because everything starts internally, right? So the outside or external reflection of what's going on into the world is just a reflection of the things that could be going on internally if we have not done the work. So that being said, people, it's 32 minutes in the video. I'll leave it there. I hope part of the message resonated with you. Take whatever fits you, and then share, like, subscribe. I do want to say that, I really like your support. I really like the fact that you like my videos, that you share my videos, that you subscribe to my videos or to my channel. And you can leave comments. You can say whatever it is that you don't agree with. Like, I'm all open for it, because I feel like, if I can do my job into sharing the message that I'm inspired to share, then it's all good. I know I'm doing my work. So on that note,